everyone. Thanks for coming. We're happy to be here to talk about Boston. I'm Teresa Neff-Webster. I am currently the Chief Operating Officer for Boston Public Schools. I've been in education my entire career. I was a kindergarten teacher for 16 years and then moved into operations a long time ago. So I've been doing this for a long, long time in public schools around the country and internationally. And I've been with Boston about 4 years. I came the day we closed down for the pandemic, so it's been exciting. And I'm gonna let Katherine introduce herself.
Thanks, Teresa. Good morning, everyone. My name is Katherine Walsh. I'm the Sustainability, Energy, and Environment Program Director for Boston Public Schools. I've been there about 6.5 years, working through the wonderful Facilities Management Department under Teresa's leadership in the Operations Division. And prior to coming to BPS, I was actually in higher ed sustainability out at UC Berkeley, working there. So it was a really great experience to be out at UC Berkeley and be able to take some of that innovation and leadership back to Boston, my home.
So we're gonna take about 10 minutes to talk through what we're doing in Boston and why we're doing it with indoor air quality, and then really wanna use a lot of the time for your questions, hoping to kind of glean some information from you as well around what you're doing in your spaces. So we're gonna give a little bit of background about Boston. We're gonna talk about our indoor air quality system, also the Green New Deal for Boston Public Schools that was announced a few years ago, our facilities condition assessment work, and then what are we gonna do now that ESSER no longer exists and we have a fiscal cliff that I'm sure we can all kind of relate to. So I'm gonna let you read the slide. I'm not gonna read it for you, but we are the oldest public school district in the United States, which we're very proud of. Currently, we have 49,000 students and around 10,000 staff. That has been reduced over the last 5 years, so we are seeing a decline in our enrollment that we're dealing with. We have 119 schools, pre-K to 12. Our student demographics are up on the board. We have 11.6 million square feet in 132 buildings that we own and operate. Of those buildings, 50% were built before 1950, and 70% were before 1970, 73% were before 1970. So we have an infrastructure concern in our city that we had to deal with. This made us ripe for huge concerns when the pandemic hit. Everyone in Boston has a clear understanding on the age of our buildings and the air quality in our buildings, they thought. There was no real data about the air quality in our spaces. There was just an assumption that we have old buildings, therefore we must have poor air quality, therefore it's dangerous and we can't ever go back to school. That was the narrative from 2020 to 2021. Like most of us in this room, I'm sure, we spent the first year of the pandemic throwing the kitchen sink at the pandemic. We would buy all sorts of fancy things to try and figure out how to make it safe and make people feel good about coming back to our buildings. We spent over $12 million ensuring that we had one window in every classroom that could open. So before the pandemic, Boston Public Schools could not confirm that we had one window in every classroom that could open. So that's the kind of derelict conditions that we were dealing with. So in order to kind of attack the pandemic on multiple avenues, we were looking at how to be reactionary, but the facilities team, and Katherine's team in particular, was looking at how to be proactive and tell the story about what was actually happening in our buildings. So I'm gonna let Katherine talk through how they did that and kind of where we are right now.
I think we all can attest that investing in your staff structure and capacity is really key to being able to take care of and maintain and invest in our buildings. And so as I mentioned, I'm very proud to be part of the Facilities Management Department under Brian Ford's direction. And that's a really nice place for the Sustainability, Energy, and Environment program to live. Because we are so operational focused, we're able to work very closely with the other staff members in facilities management, everything from custodial to warehouse to supplies to all of our tradespeople, so plumbing, alterations and repairs, roofing, HVAC. That's very key for our collaboration that we're working together. And as you can see, we have a very robust portfolio of issues that we're responsible for across 132 buildings. So this may be familiar to you. This goes back to December 2020. It was this idea that you're taking a layered risk reduction approach to dealing with COVID-19. This was actually not a new concept to us in environment, health, and safety. The layered risk reduction approach to reducing the risk of infectious diseases is very common practice when you're dealing with air quality. It's something that's promoted by the US EPA's IAQ Tools for Schools program, that you basically want to implement multiple strategies in parallel to reduce the risk. So as Teresa mentioned, in COVID, it was everything from actual maintenance and investments in our buildings, but hand washing, vaccines, staying at home, social distancing. The air quality was just one of those layers. So this is a timeline that really just focuses on the ventilation and IAQ investment layers that we made in that very first year. And when you see it, it's both daunting and kind of impressive, again, in the moment of a crisis, what we were able to do around air quality and ventilation, given that 2/3 of our buildings are naturally ventilated. They rely on operable windows as their primary source of ventilation. So we invested in HEPA air purifiers, we did air exchange testing, we did preventative maintenance on our existing HVAC systems, we did environmental audits. But one of the biggest things we made an investment in, and this is really a tribute to the leadership at the time, so Teresa, our chief operating officer at the time, the mayor, the superintendent, they believed in our proposal to invest in live monitoring, so live indoor air quality monitoring. We wanted to modernize the way we were already doing air quality testing at that time. Historically, BPS had been testing manually. We had staff that would go in using manual instruments, and as you know, that's really only capturing a moment in time. It's not truly giving you the data that you need, this consistent data. You could measure a room at 9 a.m. and get good readings of air quality and leave and not know that something happened later in that day that was impacting the air quality. With this live monitoring, you can now see the actual data and trends and be able to track what's happening in the classrooms and do the most important thing, which is take action. So we're actually monitoring 6 different parameters. These were the ones that we selected as a district were most important for us. CO2 being a marker for ventilation. That's very key. We use CO2 monitoring as a marker for ventilation. But we were also interested in things like particulate matter, given that we are so reliant on operable windows, and temperature and relative humidity, because thermal comfort is a key part of the story of indoor environmental quality, not just indoor air quality. So we basically installed in, only about 6 months, so it's quite impressive, over 4,300 indoor air quality sensors, one in every single classroom, main office, and nurse's office in the district. They're connected through the internet, wireless, but they're plug-in, and we have them secured in the wall so that they can't be tampered with, they can't be unplugged. And the key to the data, we're collecting over 2 billion data points a year. What do you even do with that data? How can you actually manage it? What do you use it for? We created this public dashboard. Transparency was key for us. We wanted to be able to share the data of what was happening in our classrooms with teachers, with families, with students, with other staff. So you yourselves can actually visit our dashboard right now and see what's happening in air quality in our district. And so that's an example of what the dashboard is. So using data in our operations, again, the key is taking action. How have we used it to respond to the data when we're seeing elevated levels? We also use it as an education and communication tool. And before I hand it off to Teresa, I just want to say it's also been incredibly powerful as a tool in terms of investments and influence. We did not expect this program to go so globally viral, but it has really been making waves across the world and across the conversation of indoor air quality in schools and how important it is. We're really proud of that influence, because we need more standards and investments in our schools around indoor air quality. So now I'll hand it over to Teresa.
So I'm going to talk about two different things that were happening in parallel to all the work that Katherine's team was doing around indoor air quality. We are on our third mayor and third superintendent in 4 years. So the current mayor made an announcement about the Green New Deal for BPS, which I'll talk about at the end of our presentation in a minute or so. But it's a shared commitment around creating safe, accessible electric transportation to our students, safe, accessible water and spaces for our students, and rethinking about how we feed our students with local sourced food, and that we use electric heating in our buildings. We have a mandate that we will have every building in the city of Boston be fossil fuel free by 2050. See the smile, it's ironic, but it's a mandate that we're going to try and attack, providing our leadership's mandate. So along with the work that Katherine's team was doing with IAQ sensors parallel, I underwent the facilities condition assessment project for Boston Public Schools. Prior to this project, unfortunately, the city did not have real-time data around the assets in our buildings. We had a report from 2016 that was a dead report, i.e. the report happened in 2016 and they did not continue updating the assets, so it was not clear in 2020 and 2021 what the assets were in our building and their useful life. So we underwent a facilities condition assessment. I'm sure most people in the room understand what that is. It's a tool to understand the useful life and conditions of every asset in our building. So we worked with an outside vendor to create this facility condition assessment, which was made up of 4 sub-scores: the condition score of how old an asset is, the modernization score, if an asset is in useful condition but it was put into the building in 1970, it's no longer what a 21st century educational space should be, i.e. if we have lights that are working and their useful life is great, but they are dim and dark and it creates a really dark atmosphere for the students, they're not actually a modern asset. Then we looked at the space efficiency. How well are we using our space based on the enrollment in each building? And then finally, importantly, the energy efficiency score. How efficient is the building being run? So we took these 4 scores and created one large overall building score, which is wonderful that we have, again, these 2 static reports. But how do we make sure that we don't end up in the same space that we were in 2016? So we took all of the data from those reports, which is everything I just talked about, and in addition, the vendor did a ADA report around our accessible spaces and what we would need to do to make our spaces accessible. Again, more than half our buildings are not currently accessible for our students. So we took all of that data and created an online dynamic dashboard. And that means that it is connected to our work order system, which is Asset Essentials. And so every time there's a boiler that's replaced, the new asset information automatically goes to this live dashboard, which is also public facing. Again, transparency is really important to us, so that you can see at any given day, in any given moment, what is the useful life and how is the building running. So this is an example of the actual dashboard. You have the summary page that talks about the building itself, talks about how the enrollment of the actual school, and then the overall, this one is about my school, and it's the overall score from on the left-hand side, and then each of those sub-scores on the right-hand side. And you'll see the overall, so in blue is the school, in light orange is the neighborhood, and in dark orange is the overall district score. So again, the overall district score for building dashboard is 38 in Boston currently. So what we're doing in taking all of this transparent information and data is ensuring that anyone in the nation, but specifically in Boston, our parents, our teachers, our community leaders, our students have access to their air quality and they have access to every asset in their building. And the purpose behind this was very clearly to hold us accountable, to hold us as a district accountable, to hold our mayors accountable, frankly, to say we've never really been able to say this is what we need to make our building safe for our students and staff. And so the final question is, what do we do with all this? We've been living in this great bubble for the last 3 years. Everything's been funded. We've been getting funding for IAQ, we've been funding for FCA, we've been funding for a lot of great initiatives. That cliff is here. Our leadership likes to call it a step stool, but it's not a step stool. It is a steep cliff that we're facing. And so what do we do when we have an announcement about Green New Deals? What we have decided to do is to use this data to have real transparent conversations around what we need to do in our buildings. And that is bringing people into the conversation versus making a decision and then telling them. That's bringing in our community leaders, it's bringing in the city's facilities team, it's bringing in the facilities political advisors so that they're very clear. If you're gonna make an announcement about being fossil fuel free by 2050, here's everything that we need to do and the financial repercussions of it in order to do it. So this is what we like to call phase 2. So phase 1 was getting all the data and being transparent, and now we're moving into phase 2 of how are we gonna get this done. So we have been mandated by the state to create a 10-year facilities plan as part of a school improvement plan that Boston Public Schools is under. So that means our 10-year infrastructure plan, how we're going to attack our infrastructure over the next 10 years, and then combined with our capital planning team, what schools are gonna have to close, what schools are gonna have to merge, and what schools are gonna have to go completely offline. Because again, 132 plus buildings for 49,000 students, the math doesn't make any sense right there. So we're gonna be using this data to move into some difficult conversations, both with our leadership to hold them accountable, to hold ourselves accountable, and to hopefully communicate to our partners in the community about what our plans are. That's us. We have no other presentations, but happy to take any questions about the work we are doing and or what we plan to do next with it.
Yeah, I'm back here. It's hard to negotiate through that. It's like a maze, but I'm happy to do it so we can get some questions going. So anybody right now? This gentleman over here. Kind of feel like Donahue. Remember that show?
A great presentation. What software did you use for that dynamic dashboard, if you don't mind sharing?
It's a Google-based, Google Suite, or I can get you the actual software, but it's based on, we're a Google city, and so it has to integrate with Google, and it's Looker Studio is what it is. Looker Studio, and it's based on a Google platform.
And for the IAQ dashboard, it's through SGS Galson, and the subcontractor is Terabase.
Song and dance? Okay, they telling me I got to put on a production. I didn't sign up for this. No. Thank you so much. I'm Randy Morales from East Baton Rouge Parish School System, Louisiana. I commend your courage to do indoor air quality. Some of us don't want to know what's out there because once we know, we have to take action. So what were some of the biggest surprises or takeaways from getting into this endeavor and getting this data? Because I'm kind of worried that the nerdy side of me wants to know, but I don't know if I want to know.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to give like a macro, and I want you to go micro.
Sure.
So from a macro perspective, East Boston is right next to the airport. And so one of the things that Katherine's team did was they made sure that every building had an outside IAQ as well. So it was comparable to the air quality that your neighborhood is in as well. So yes, the data wasn't great. We expected it not to be great. Much like the FCA, we knew the data wasn't going to be great. But what was, for me, at my level, surprising and gratifying was that the hyperbole died down and the accusations around the air quality in the district died down because people literally on an hour-by-hour basis could go into room 103 in Adams School and know what the temperature was, know what the CO2 levels were, like know everything, so that it took away the ability to have a misconstrued idea of what was going on. And it forced us to have conversations around phase 2 that we're in now with our partners at BU. What are we going to do, right? So how are we going to attack air in our city to actually make the schools a safer environment? They are safe. They could absolutely have better indoor air quality. So it's from my seat, it was like a great space to be able to, frankly shut some people down who were saying some things about our spaces that weren't true. I'd love to hear.
Yeah, that's perfect, Teresa. And building on that, we want to work with facts, right? And especially in environment, health, and safety. And air quality often can become a very qualitative statement, good or bad, healthy, unhealthy, but for whom, right? And there's a lot of factors that go into air quality. Something that's healthy for me might not be as healthy for someone with asthma. So we really wanted to get data so we could talk in a more factual way and also help to set standards. There are no federal or state standards for air quality in schools, right? So we had to pull from lots of different existing experts from OSHA, from EPA, from ASHRAE to kind of come up with our best standard for schools. Now we're actually influencing standards. I think those are coming down the pipeline. And by having that data, we are able to also get funding, which is key. AHERA is a perfect example. AHERA is regulated. We have to do it or we're not in compliance. I can use that in my favor to get the staffing, the contracts, the resources I need. If you can be in control of your air quality data and take that risk, then maybe you can use it to get the resources you need. I also think it's important to know that you would rather be in control of that data, the narrative, right? Rather than, like Teresa said, someone else being in control of it. Because we also live in a world now where people can bring in their own monitors on their body, right? Do you really want a questionable device that someone has just breathed in and not used properly to tell you what the air quality is in your space? So it's sort of about being able to provide that expertise and support and use the data to get the resources you need.
I think we have another question right here.
Hi, Dana Fox, Chief Operating Officer for Richmond Public Schools. We also have aging facilities, and I love that you use the words accusation and narrative. I'm in the throes of this right now. We are in our first year of collective bargaining agreements with our teachers, and this has been a catalyst for, we have mold in our buildings. Our buildings are unsafe. You have to do something. Shut these schools down. It is a narrative that has created panic in our communities and for our stakeholders. And so now I have been tasked with testing our buildings for mold and the indoor air quality. And our school board then said, okay, well, Dana, you need to choose more schools to test just to be sure. And I said, no. I will send an email to our building leaders and say, do you want your building tested? Because I do not want to be the one that cherry picks which buildings are going to be tested and which aren't. So of course we added 18 more buildings to our testing regimen, but I will say that this is very real, and not just from the pandemic, but just from a stage of, we are a collective bargaining unit. You're going to provide us safe facilities as part of our agreement, which is great, of course. We didn't get funding for that.
Right.
You all got your pay raises, which is wonderful. Everybody needs to make their coin, but we didn't get fundings for our facilities to do all these tests. And if the tests come back and they are scary, as he indicated, and then you have remediation and you have all of these things, for facilities, we have buildings that are 100 years old.
Yep.
And so this is super helpful to know about the air quality sensors and things that we could likely maybe use our resources on, and have some data to change the narrative to say, I'm not putting mold in our buildings. This is just naturally happening. And also there's mold outside. You're breathing mold everywhere you go, but you can't reason with them. So thank you for what you've said.
Oh, thank you.
To your point, it's a great prioritization tool, right? You can have the data to say, oh, actually these schools are in good standing. Therefore, that's going to help us pick which schools we're going to prioritize, like help you pick those 18 or the next 5.
And it helps to get money. It really does. I can be in the same room that you are in, talking about, well, the collective bargaining, this, that, and the other, and I can say, absolutely, here's what I need. And then we can go back and tell them. And if you don't want to give that to me, I don't know what to say to you. So it holds people accountable, and I think it's critical.
I think there was another, where is she? There she is. Right up here, probably time for 1 or 2 more questions, then we have to wrap up this session. There you go.
Hi, Alicia with Houston ISD. Really appreciate your presentation. I know in this morning's session we were talking about safe and secure buildings. This conversation taps into safety and security. So one of the questions was, what do we do next? One, we have to define what safety and security means to each of us as well as our students. So question for you, we're also doing the IAQ assessments throughout our entire district. We're also doing water quality. So are you going to look at water quality as well? Because coming out of COVID and being in that pandemic, a number of us purchased bottled water. A number of us purchased the air filtration systems, which are supposed to be running and, not moving from home to home or just not being run at all. But water is going to be critical as well. So are you going to tap into that, and will that be a part of your dashboard?
It's a great question. And we were blessed that Katherine came to Boston before the pandemic and started a water project that was $16 million funded, $10 million from the city and a $6 million grant that she earned. She gets a lot of money, and we really like that about her. And Boston, I'm sure those of you who are from the East Coast know that it has been in the news for a long time about the fact that there's lead in the water, and it's not a safe drinking space. And so Katherine's team actually started pre-pandemic this huge water initiative that I want you to talk through more, because she's way smarter talking about it than I am. But now the pandemic has almost pushed that even further, that people are even more excited about it, and they trust that the water is clean and safe to drink based on the work that they've been doing. So I'd love to hear.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, when I arrived in Boston, only about 19 schools were using tap water. And to Teresa's point, we do have some of the best actual water in the country, but it's because of our buildings, the lead piping often is changing that quality of the water. And that was true in BPS. So the majority were on bottled water. And I just found that very unacceptable. It's also an operational nightmare, from the cost to the people maintenance to the environmental impacts of bottled water. So for years, I was kind of a squeaky wheel. Even got told at one point, not obviously by Teresa, but by someone, to stop talking about it. But we persevered, and we got almost $17 million, as well as a water project manager to join my team. And what we're doing to address that issue is very straightforward. We're going school by school, investing in filtered bottle refill stations at every school. We also have a very rigorous annual testing program. And so every unit that is used for consumption or cooking in the district is tested at least once annually for lead, copper, and coliform if it has a filter. We also test each new unit. This is a little bit of overkill, but it's because of our history of needed data and transparency. We actually test it 3 times before we turn it on. And we make all of those results around our water quality public in our website. We send it to the schools to share with their community. But we now have, in the last year and a half alone, thanks to the leadership of our project manager, we've actually switched 50 schools over from bottled water to these filtered bottle refill stations. We're basically going through every school. We will be hitting every single building by the end of this project.
Okay, we got time for one last question from this gentleman.
Hi, Tom Fenisa from Anchorage School District. So, like many of our buildings are over 50 years old, they were created to deliver an education that didn't involve internet and modern teaching methods. So how do you balance things like indoor air quality and water with providing spaces that provide an education at the level that we expect today?
That's a great question. So one of the things that I've been doing since I came into BPS is creating cross-functional teams. So as an example, with the IAQ project and the FCA project, we brought in heads of technology and the schools division. So we had school leader voice, we had technology voice, we had facilities voice. We were ensuring that we were thinking about this from a global perspective. What does this look like and feel like for the students in the buildings versus what is most operationally effective, right? And so we're very operationally minded, and sometimes you lose sight that if you're taking a room for a internet server that should be a pullout space, you need to kind of rethink that. So we've been trying to be very global in our approach, and we also prioritize, right? So one of the things that I just said yesterday to superintendent was, here's the priority of 5 things that I have to get done this year, and we're at peril if we don't. And here are 15 things that you need to decide are your prioritization. So I give them all the information, allow them to make the decisions, and try and be as tactful to folks in the facilities team. Katherine might disagree when I tell them like what the decisions have been made. And so I am very much the go-between around the policy and frankly politics of what's being decided, and then what needs to happen boots on the ground. And we try, it's, you know, I fail every day at making somebody happy, but I try and make everyone at least not livid as much as possible.